Greetings and welcome to another River Radio Sports Central podcast alongside Matt Varney from 103.5 ESPN. I am Darren Kinnard. Well, Matty, this week practice started for football across the state. We are recording on Friday morning, 2 weeks away.
2 weeks. You can feel it bubbling up. We've in the off season talked a whole bunch about. Not really on camera, but just I've been accumulating river to river stats in the past 2 years, and my brain has melted the whole time. But between that and a couple of the other things that we do here at River Radio, you're feeling it. You're feeling it, and I'm starting to think as I'm getting near the end of doing all of that of okay, how can I incorporate this into my broadcasts and into the River's Mouth that we do here and a bunch of other stuff, but at the same time, oh yeah, we got to get that poll together, and we got to do this and that, and I'm like, okay, 2 weeks, and I got to stay on track now because we got 14 days. We're right on the cusp, and so I'm starting to build kind of my schedule and my internal rhythm of, okay, we got to get all this stuff done and ready for night one, and then after that, it's basically Monday, Tuesday, basically what do I got every single day?
Yeah, it's one of those things, and it's worse as you get older. I'm just gonna tell you, it's like every time I turn around, it's Friday again, and it's like, well, where did that week go? And,
right.
And this has been kind of a disjointed summer because it feels like it got a little bit of a late start with baseball. The way it ended, and then you had the dead week kind of there at the end of June through the 4th of July, and then July was really just kind of a blur, and now we're in this first week of August, and football has already started practice because of the season starting the 21st, or in some cases across the state that will start on Thursday. It'll be the 20th. Now next week, all the other fall sports and activities will get underway with practices and tryouts and things of that nature. And golf will hold its first matches, but you can hold your first matches on Thursday. That will be the next sport to really get in, and we'll actually have the first official results of the fall.
Yeah, it's always crazy to me in the past of, obviously everything starting next week. Now football starts a week earlier, as we've talked ad nauseum, but it was always crazy of, hey, practice starts, and then you get there Wednesday, Thursday, and you're like, we've got results. What do you mean? But that's not everybody works under football's rules, and I think a lot of people forget that sometimes. I forget it sometimes. But yeah, you see golf and you see cross country, just off to the races basically. A little bit of tennis as well, but usually football is the last one to actually get a result in.
Right, yeah.
So it's crazy, but it's about to be a whirlwind.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me is that, again, old guy here, you had situations in the past where, say, DeCoin didn't have school until after the fair was over.
Right.
And so now so many schools are already in session.
Yeah.
This is the first week of August, and that calendar has kind of shifted so much. We're going to have the first 3 weeks of the season in before we get to Labor Day. So a third of the season's going to be over before we even get to Labor Day.
That is really crazy to even consider. In some years it'll be 2 instead. Right. But yeah, you're going to see a lot of it being now you're going to be a third of the way through, and so then that's going to become kind of a little bit of a benchmark for a lot of coaches of, okay, we get that long weekend, and they might say, hey guys, if you go undefeated through the first 3 weeks, hey, Monday's off. Monday, Labor Day you get off. If not, then we're coming back here. If you're 2-1,
you're going to be laboring on
exactly,
Labor Day.
Exactly. If we're 2-1, you're laboring. If you guys can get to 3-0 and hit these type of benchmarks, we'll sit there and talk that Saturday before type of deal. But I'm sure some coaches have done that in the past. But now that you're looking at it being legitimately, we're a third of the way through, that's a legitimate benchmark right there for a lot of coaches to sit there and be like, even if it's not something silly like, hey, you get the day off or whatever, it's going to be a very important weekend for a lot of coaches of being like, how are we progressing? For a lot of coaches that aren't in a closed conference, that was our last non-conference game. Now we're going into conference. There's a lot of things that Labor Day now is going to represent for across the state for football.
I'm going to say there's probably going to be laboring on Labor Day
More than
because it's conference opening week for a lot of schools. But the other thing that I think has been interesting is that with school being moved up, it has removed the opportunity, in large part, for the multiple practices a day, because you used to have 2-a-days, and some will have 3-a-days.
Some
and
would.
They put some rules in place where you can only do so many hours if you do multiple practices a day, for player safety and things of that nature. But very few are doing the 2-a-days, or if they are doing 2-a-days, it's, hey, we might watch some film in the morning, and then we will hold our actual practice in the evening. And now, again, with school starting, then it's going to be, hey, we don't really have that option anymore. We're into the regular schedule already.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's just, man, things get so ratcheted up. And, when you add in school, and like you said, it used to be 3 days, used to be 2 days. You might see that in the opening kind of days for football. It just really depends on the school itself. Right. But you might see a little bit of that. But, gone are the days. And I mean, these kids, they're still working just as hard. Don't
right.
let that fool you of like, oh man, they're still working extremely hard. And so don't go and say, well, back in our day, I used to do 3-a-days.
Right.
That was obviously exhausting and tough, but these kids are still putting in the work. Right. Being at Murfreesboro the other day for their first practice, they did not stop running. There was constant movement among all the kids there constantly. I don't know if there was a single kid that was just standing around. If they were standing around, it was because they were waiting in line to go ahead and do the drill that they were doing, which was going to be a pretty blow the wind out of you type of deal right there. So these kids are working just as hard. They might get 1 or 2-a-days, but it's a new format, but the coaches have, for the most part, adjusted very well to the new format.
Right, and the other thing that we see is just kind of that shift in practice, just as the medical knowledge has come in to eliminate the excess pounding, and
that helps.
And so eliminating some of the practices and the way practices are run in this day and age, there are certainly some liabilities when it comes to you hear a lot from the defensive guys about tackling. You really have to figure out how to come up with tackling reps without the actual tackling, and that's not an easy thing to do. But then the other thing is like these first couple of days of practice are part of the acclimatization period where it's helmets only, or there's no pads, no nothing, and then it's a couple days of shells only, and then it's full pads. So kind of the nature of it feels like these last few years that they instituted these first 2 days have always been kind of quiet weather-wise and cooler than normal. And then by the time they get to full pads, well, now it's going to be nasty. And then when you look at the forecast, 95 on Monday and Tuesday.
Well, at this point, you wouldn't draw it up any better. That's exactly how they probably wanted it at this point of, just get used to being in these, if you get the privilege of being in the playoffs, which at this point, who doesn't? but if you get the privilege of being in the playoffs, you get to wear the pads and it'd be a little bit cooler for you. Right. But at the same time, I think the coaches that are going to really have their team on the leg up are the ones that didn't take this year the same as last year in terms of preparation. July, obviously, a preparation month. And I'm sure every coach did things a little bit differently than how they would have last year. But the ones that kind of made the right shift and said this is how we're going to rest up a little bit differently, because that week right there, I don't think it can be overstated just how much you're losing by taking it away from the kids getting to rest up and everything. So it's going to be interesting to see what actually ends up working. That's why we've said in the past, in a couple of years, wouldn't be surprised if you see a bunch of the schools basically it's just saying, we use our last contact day right on up into practice, basically. But if that ends up not being the format that truly works of, hey, we gave our guys a chance to recharge, to heal up, gave them a couple days, that might be the way that works as well. But I think it truly is going to come down to experimenting, obviously. But I think this year you're going to see the benefit of the coaches that were like, yeah, no, we don't have that week, so we're going to take the opportunity to scale back a little bit, which may hurt you in terms of a program building. You got to readjust things. But for this year, at least, we had to scale back a little bit. And then in the offseason, we'll readjust and everything. I think you're going to see a lot of benefit of the ones that scaled back the right amount. There's enough scaling back, and then there's too much.
Right.
It's finding that sweet spot, which I don't know if any coach really knows yet what that is, but they're trying to figure it out.
And it may vary from year to year with
Yeah.
Whatever you have talent and processing what you're putting in, and most teams I think had about a week. It maybe a little less because in the past you would be done, and then you would have the entire next week was off. And I remember talking to one administrator whose school started that Wednesday of the week, and he was like, why didn't we just start school that following Monday, so these kids could actually have a full week break? But I mean, most of the football programs, they did Monday through Thursday, for the contact day. So the last contact day was Thursday, and then it was, hey, we're not going to do anything until Wednesday, and everything practiced.
So it gives about 5-6 days.
Yeah, I mean, you get a chance to at least get some respite before the full grind gets underway. You mentioned the coaches that are coming back and doing things. I was down at Anna on Wednesday for the first official practice for Joel Dallas, who takes over, and as a new head coach, that's one of those things you just got to kind of feel out as you go. But he's a guy that has seen the best and better days of AJ football, and then he's been an assistant as in the program has struggled the last few years. They've got a 19-game losing streak, and the thing that impressed me so much was just the fact that, and I know it's early, but everybody's on that same page, and the buy-in from the seniors that are in this. And they may not see those tangible results in the W's or the playoff appearances. They might. We talk about playoffs.
You never know.
But, I mean, by and large, that probably is not going to happen. But all these guys know that, and they want to be part of that foundation that when you look back in 10 years, that when the program is going the right direction, that, hey, we were part of that.
And that's the one thing that I don't think we've talked about enough about, the allowing more teams into the playoffs. I do feel like these teams that are sitting at 3-4 wins, that are just kind of stuck in the mud, getting that opening round, that for us it'll be the first round, for IHSA it's the opening round. Getting that experience right there will be kind of like, pushing the bobsled a little bit down the way of, hey, we made it here. Right. Now let's see if we can win that game next year. So it will be building blocks, and for AJ, obviously they're trying to build a lot of blocks, and if those seniors can even get to that opening round game, I think that'll feel like a success for them. A lot of people may sit there and be like, well, look at your record, but for them, they'll be like, yeah, but look, we got to play that 10th game, which will be a big deal for them, and could be something that, God willing, Joel Dallas is there for as long as Brett Dietering was. He can sit there and say, yeah, the program really got started because we got that 10th game in that first year. So it will be a big deal if they can get there. But those seniors, man, I know those names. They've been, crossing my page for several years. And, man, those are some hardworking kids that if I wanted to build a program, there's a lot of names to choose from, but they'd definitely be on the list of, yeah, I'd take that guy. Why not?
Well, and it's a great example. Again, AJ was kind of they were the standard bearer for a while. They had the longest consecutive playoff streak for a while. And it just shows that how fast it can go away. And it takes so long to build, but then it can go away so quickly. So Coach Dallas and company, it's a huge undertaking, and it's a big deal. And we look back to last year. You had a guy, Hall of Famer Mike Rood. Yeah. In his 60 years of coaching, was able to come into a situation, and they had a just a bad previous few years and hadn't made the playoffs in ages, and and just changing the mindset. And again, I am not putting Coach Dallas and Coach Root in that.
Right.
I mean, that's not what I'm saying here, but it's just the change of mindset, and then then you've got to go out and to do the work.
Well, and specifically for what Coach Root did, obviously he brings the name brand. He's a name that everybody knows, and then he's from Christopher, so he brings that as well of, I know this family, I know that family, and he got a lot of guys out that otherwise probably wouldn't have been out, based on his name, based on being able to go into homes that he was obviously allowed in, and to say, I would love to have your kid play this year in football. He did a lot of the hard work that people don't see, that for a man his age shouldn't have to be doing, but he was doing it because it meant so much to him. But also he brings that pedigree and that experience that if you were going to pick someone to turn a program around, and I'm not saying specifically Mike Root, but he'd be kind of the, you want the grizzled vet that has been there, done that, knows the ins and outs of high school football, and that was Mike Root. He knew what it took, and then you have to add in again the personal factor of, this is my hometown. Right. I know everybody here. I know who would fit where and everything. Not that some of the previous coaches didn't, but it was just the fact that this is my hometown. I know these people and stuff. So it was the perfect concoction at the right time for CZRE, but at the same time, Joel Dallas, it could be for him as well. So we'll see what happens. But it when you get down to it, it takes buy-in from the kids. The
buy-in is so key, and obviously, Root's resume gets him that instant credibility, and so that change. And again, do we think that AJ can go to 5? You get to 5 wins or not? I mean, I'm not going to say it can't happen.
Right.
It's unlikely. I mean, but at the same point, again, if something positive can happen early.
Absolutely.
And that's what happened with CZRE too.
Yes.
Is winning that opener, I think, changed everything for them.
I remember after that week, I don't know if it was you or someone else said, yeah, they've got a couple more kids out this week because of that win. That's right. All it takes is, oh, hey, we could be winning. Well, I wouldn't mind being part of a winning program, which is unfortunate that that's how it goes, but some kids, that's where their mindset is.
It's not easy. I mean, it's one thing in basketball if you're bad. And you get beat by 40, you get on the bus and you go home, and you get beat by 40 in football, you get beat up too. And so the kids that do stick it out or whatever on bad football teams, it's those numbers aren't great, and that's why you see these programs with lower numbers. And when you see these programs that have struggled, because you can't get a Mike Root to go take on a reclamation project like that, because then you've got to find the right guy, and sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times to do that, and that's what we've seen in places like Heron, at Anna, at CZR. It was 3 coaches in 4 years for the senior class, and that's a tough road to hoe.
No, and credit to Coach Dallas as well, and just like people in Anna know just the situation of that community right now with just some of the businesses that have closed, and not even businesses, but the facilities that have closed. They know that there's going to be a little bit of a decline in enrollment probably, and so there's a lot of things going on there, but Joel Dallas is going to give it his best effort. I know that. I've talked to him. You've talked to him. And to have someone there that's basically been a part of the program for about 20 years, he's going to give it his all. He's going to try to get them back to where they are used to being. And if they don't, he can at least say he gave it his best effort.
Right, and he always talked about on Coach Dietering's staff, he was the energy guy.
Right,
and that's contagious. And again, you're talking about 14 or 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, and so they just want somebody that's going to believe in them, and again, you still have to go out and execute. All the rah-rah stuff is one thing, but you still have to execute. But anyway, interesting. Some other things that as we head towards opening week in a hurry, we talk about a lot in college, and we the transfer portal, and there's no official portal in high school sports. We kind of joke about it behind the scenes about the transfer portal.
Well,
but
in Chicago, they don't have the portal, but there's enough people in Chicago that they're like, hey, the portal's open.
Yeah, and it's free for all anyway. And so we've got a few people that players that have gone from one place to the other, and these are some impact guys. And
I mean, you see it every year, but usually it's. And I'm not saying these kids aren't going there for academic reasons or mom and dad got a job somewhere else, but usually it goes under the radar because they aren't necessarily always the impact player, or they're an offensive lineman they don't get their names in the paper, as the coaches always say. And so, but this year it's just name after name after name of, man, that's the top box score guy. And it's like, man, there's a lot of guys going a lot of different places, whether it's for one reason or another.
Yeah, and and three of them are actually four of them are running backs, and guys that have produced. Three of them. I was right the first time. And produced at high levels. And Jashawn Staples at Mount Vernon, phenomenal rusher. He in his younger days he was part of at Centralia, and then now he's going back for his senior year to Centralia and taking a really good offense, and now you're going to add a 1,000-yard rusher, more.
I think it'll be more.
I mean, I think he's at 1,900 through 2 years of. So I mean that's a huge weapon. Obviously Keegan Shields from Murfreesboro. You've talked about going to Carbondale again, adding a weapon to an offense that was already gonna be pretty good.
I mean, he had almost 900 rushing yards last year, and near the end of the season, he was really starting to kind of get hands. So he was coming out of the backfield and catching passes. I think it was somewhere between 5 and 7 catches that he had last year, and he was figuring it out. And I mean, I remember in the summer I had gone to Murfreesboro and said, well, he's 6'1", 6'2", throw him out at wide receiver, why not? And they're like, we tried that, but he turned out to be a fantastic running back. But now Brian Lee gets this awesome weapon, and he probably can sit there and be like, well, obviously you're a really good runner, but maybe I want to use you as a gadget player. So they're probably we'll see in a couple weeks, obviously, what route they decide to go with him. But I would not be surprised that he's going to be that hard-nosed runner. But he's probably developed quite a bit in terms of gridiron action since we last saw him.
Yep, and another guy that figures to make an immediate impact, Tyler McConnell, going from Pinckneyville to DuQuoin, and the top tight end prospect in the region, and again now he goes across the creek, and a guy that figures to make a pretty big impact.
The top career leading active player in terms of receiving yards right now in the River to River, over 700 yards, a heck of a lot of catches. I don't remember, I think about 60 or so. And I'm sure Jonathan Brown is sitting there saying we couldn't come last year. But from what I recall, because I do recall seeing in the beatdown that Murfreesboro got in that final week of the season, DuQuoin did have their backup quarterback in for a little bit, and he did look pretty good. So I don't know much about him, but the quarterback that I believe is going to be their starter this year is probably over the moon right now and says, I got my favorite target already figured out.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Jace Hampton goes from Johnson City to Benton, a guy that can be a factor on both sides of the ball. And one other from Mount Vernon to Centralia, Carmaine Hopkins, a defensive back. And again, we talked last week about Centralia probably being the best team in the area.
More than likely.
They were going to be loaded anyway, and so now you're getting a couple other pieces that just continue to pile that up.
Yeah, I think before you add in Staples and Hopkins, I think that a lot of people figured they're the number one, but there might have been one or two other teams that could make a case in Little Egypt. Now with Staples and Hopkins, everyone's like, yeah, they're clearly the number one, and just about everybody in the Little Egypt area is like, they're in the Cahokia. Thank God we don't have to face them because it's going to be a beatdown every time. I'm sure there's a few teams that would like to face them for one reason or another, but a lot of teams are probably like, yeah, no, you can go face those teams this year. There are in the non-conference. Salem's going to see them in the season opener. I think that's the only team that's
They close with that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
because there's 7 conference
Yeah.
games with East Alton Wood River still being in that big
Right.
division, which we touched on for
Yeah.
unknown reasons.
But nonetheless, I think a lot of teams that are like, yeah, you can go on over there because it's going to be a foregone conclusion if we play you anyways. And so, but again, I'm sure there's a few teams that would like to play them for one reason or another. But you look at the 2-3 position, I'd have to really dig deep. But I think there's a pretty well. Everybody kind of knows who number 1 is, and then maybe 2 to 4. I think there's a little bit of a log jam of who is that number 2 team.
Yeah, and that's the nature of preseason polls,
Yeah.
because a lot of times the voting is done on how they finished last year, and but it'll be interesting to see what the coaches see. When will that release?
Well, so I'm telling all the voters, get them in by next Friday. Usually we release on the Thursday morning before, but with it being preseason, I try to get it out Tuesday or Wednesday of that first week, so people can kind of stew in it a little bit longer,
chew on it, and get ready, get them fired up for
Yeah.
2 Fridays.
That's right.
From tonight. Well, that's going to do it for this River Radio Sports Central podcast. For Matty V, I'm Darren Kinnard. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.